We come to this place for magic. We come to the Bladtcast to laugh, to cry, occasionally be revolted, to pretend that you care. Because we need that, all of us. That indescribable feeling we get when the sound begins to prematurely dim, preserving that sacred runtime that is always measured in full minutes. And we go somewhere we've never been before. Not just entertained, but somehow reborn. Together. From guests who feel obligated to come on because Christian used to work for that famous guy, to hearing all about that one time Captain EO went home with a stripper. Dazzling conversation on tiny earbuds that repeatedly fall out, or a huge pair of Beats by Dre that never fit, but you spent $200 on them, so you wear them anyway. Sound we all can feel. Somehow, heartbreak feels good in a place like this. Our hosts feel like the best part of us, and stories feel perfect and powerful. Anyone who thinks being on the show will help them get on to bigger shows, it won't. The Bladtcast. We make podcasts better.
This is the Bladtcast, a sometimes fast-paced but usually meandering look at the world, hosted by Christian Blatt. So kick back, get ready for quite possibly the longest 1 hour to perhaps the shortest 2 hours and 56 minutes of your life. And now, here's Christian Blatt.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation, devotedly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Welcome to the Bladtcast. Very excited to be celebrating probably one of the finest films that any of us have ever seen. Francis Ford Coppola's instant classic, Megalopolis. I am Christian Blatt. Joining us is two of the most esteemed minds in filmmaking that I have ever had the pleasure to sit with. First and foremost, you know him, you kind of like him, the great Liam McEnany. Hello, Liam. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you. How bummed do you think Todd Phillips was when Coppola congratulated him on Joker 2? Like, it must have been a moment where he's like, I fucked up.
I really must have. And it's distracting to see Liam, for our visual audience, completely clean shaven. It's it's very disconcerting, but I appreciate you being here all the same. And we have a Joker episode coming up that I'll tease in a little bit. But also with us,
I was afraid your audience would be like, "Oh, Eric Adam Connor's on again." So I was
no.
Get rid of the beard.
You drew the line, yeah. And the greatest Emersonian mind that I think I've ever encountered, Phil Svitek. Phil, thank you for being here.
Yes. Well, I did go to Emerson, and I have to say the intro really gave me quite a massive boner, as you can see. Except it's not, because there's my knife.
Oh,
there's your final bell. You know, there's movies when you talk about, and many of the movies we talk about here are, you know, superhero science fiction movies and things like that. You always have to be so careful to let people know that there's spoilers. I couldn't spoil this movie if I tried. Megalopolis. I don't know how, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, none of us went to a screening where there was a live person there in the theater, right? Or Liam, did you have that?
No, I went to a screening actually at the Grauman's Chinese Theater, and it was packed. Like when me and my friends, when we booked it, there were 6 other people sitting. We were very excited to like be able to just relax and chat. But it actually was a full house that was with the movie beginning to end. It was kind of like, I don't think anyone enjoyed it, I think everyone. I'm sorry, I'm going off already. Sorry,
That's
Phil.
okay.
But I will say the audience was mostly quiet except for the laughter, and there was a lot of laughter to be had in this movie.
There may have been some. Yeah, I went to a Monday afternoon showing at that hotbed of cultural activity, the Burbank AMC 16. And yeah, there were like 10, maybe 15 people there who quietly watched. You know, if anybody got up to leave, it was just to go to the bathroom. It wasn't, no one stormed out, which I sort of would have expected. And Phil, I know you also didn't have someone in the theater speaking back to the screen, right?
To be honest, I don't know if I did or did not because there's so much going on. You just kind of scratching your head the whole time. So if I did, I'm not aware of it. I don't think so.
Right.
I'm like 90% sure there was not. But, if you told me that it did happen, I'd be like, sure. Okay. Yeah.
You know what's interesting about this movie, and it is actually something that it has in common with Joker 2 is a lot going on, but no story.
Correct.
No real arc, like no character arcs, no B plots, like especially Joker 2, but we're not talking about Joker 2. But
No.
Megalopolis, I walked out of there, I was like, I think Adam Driver's character started in the same place he ended, like everybody's did, except for Giancarlo Esposito's.
Well, we got a
Yeah.
whole city. We literally got a city. I mean, I just
Yeah.
want to point that out as far as
But the
the plot.
Right. So, like, building a city is not a plot, right? Like, if I was like, here's this history of New York, and it was just you watching a bunch of architects screaming at the money men as buildings were built behind them, you might be upset. You might feel like you were ripped off a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think, in the trailer for the upcoming Robert Zemeckis film Home, where it's like basically the one room in their house, the beginning of the trailer, you see sort of, dinosaurs and cavemen, and then colonizers in the house first being built, and in the trailer, I don't know, it's like 15 seconds. I think that's building a city. That's the way I want to see it. I like when it's sped up and you can see the construction of the Washington Monument or the the Empire State Building, what have you. I would say Shia LaBeouf, the young ingenue Shia LaBeouf, ends up in a very different place than when the film starts. And it's very hard to talk about this movie with someone who hasn't seen it. And Liam, you were the first person to see it, but you and Phil both basically had the same thing. And I agree. I think we're all in agreement here. This is an important movie. I think people should see, but it is by no means a good movie. I don't think that's why you see it. And let me know if you feel otherwise. There's something that happened on screen very early that made me nervous. When Megalopolis comes up and it says a fable, I got a pit in my stomach. I'm like, oh no, because I did not know that much about this movie. I went with my friend Tim Sicarda, who some people know, and he would have joined us today, but other things took his time. There are so many times where I'm like, wait, Dustin Hoffman is in this movie? Jon Voight is in this movie. And shocking of all, I think she's wonderful on Saturday Night Live. Chloe Fineman gets so much screen time in this movie. Not saying she doesn't deserve it, but I wasn't expecting it, So there's surprises all the time. I didn't know Aubrey Plaza was in this movie. And boy, is she in this movie.
It was Aubrey Plaza. I'm sorry, Phil. You go first because otherwise I'm going to talk over everything.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I saw the trailer. I think I saw like the false trailer, the one that says, it pulls the random quotes that weren't real.
I'm actually ready to show that trailer in a moment, but finish your thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that can prepare you ultimately for what this movie is. And it is like in The Matrix, they say no one can be told what The Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is that movie. I don't know if we're better for it. I don't know if we're worse for it, but it is a movie. I can unequivocally say that. And I think as I've come to realize, there are standalone scenes that I will enjoy rewatching over and over. Never do I want to watch the movie ever again unless it is like to torture someone else.
And look, this is not a movie to sit at home and watch on your TV because you'll turn it off. Like, it's absolutely must be seen in a theater where you've invested $25 and there's a projectionist who controls whether it's on or off. Like, you can't. But I said on, in a lot of ways, this is a big budget, well made Ed Wood movie, and I realized that at the very beginning when we hear Lawrence Fishburne's voice, kind of just talking about random things, and at one point he talks about just like how civilization has kind of like crashed, and you just cut to a still video of a crashed car on an overpass, and the car never comes back. There's no point of reference for why there's a car. It's just a car on an overpass as part of a montage of things that are not related to that, as part of a movie that's not related to that. And I'm sure Coppola at some point had like, this is my thesis moment. This is the crashed car is a very important metaphor, but it doesn't ever come together.
No, it doesn't. And Phil, you're sort of talking about the idea of, kind of just going and rewatching scenes. This is an hour cut on a YouTube channel by someone named USYED. And yeah, here we go. It's supposed to play, but it's not. Here.
Go back to the club. Go back to the club. Back to the club. Go back to the club. So go back to the club. So go back to the club.
Just that line that you're just like, what? So go back to the club. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I also realized that I think Adam Driver, I enjoyed him in Black Klansman, but ever since he was forced upon me in Star Wars, I could usually, it's not even take it or leave him. I could usually leave him. It's very distracting on the screen to me. But I'm sure, again, I like Black Klansman. I thought he was good at it. But in general, he's on my screen. I'm usually just distracted by what he looks like, and that's not my goal. I
like Adam Driver. I think the problem with his performance, even in that moment, like everyone laughed because that was like the meme moment. Everybody had already seen it. But I feel like the problem is he was acting like he was in one movie. Giancarlo Esposito was acting like he was in another movie. Aubrey Plaza was acting like she understood what the movie she was in was. And then Jon Voight just seemed to be like, this might be the last movie of my career. So let me just fucking go balls out with my performance because I don't know. Like Jon Voight seemed to be the most understanding of what a mess he was in and making the best of it.
Which, by the way, the last time I saw Jon Voight in a movie wasn't long ago. He's in Reagan, the Quaid movie. He plays like a retired KGB agent that's sort of telling the story of like, we knew Reagan was something special. I said, keep your eye on. I mean, hands down, the worst performance I've ever seen from Jon Voight. This one's actually, that's fine. I was texting with Liam, and I can't remember if I said the same thing to Phil, but at the end of last week, I went and saw Joker 2, and I was convinced that it was one of the biggest misfires in cinematic history. But then I saw Megalopolis, and I said, I feel like by comparison, that Joker 2 is basically Citizen Kane, or at least Magnificent Ambersons. And I don't know if I want to go so far as to give it the Kane moniker, but it's at least Ambersons. What were you going to say, Phil?
Well, the weird part about this one is that this is a passion project he wanted to make. Like with Joker 2, like kind of by default, he was forced into it and you make the best of it. And it's a much shorter time frame, right? This is like 20 plus years of, this is what I want to do with my life.
By the way, I'm just going to interject. It's 40 years. He started wanting to make this in, I believe, 1983. Liam and I were both doing some deep dives on this. But so that only just reinforces your point, Phil, that this is really a passion project.
I've been following it for 2 years, so I know a lot about it.
Yeah, so it's just this idea that like for all those 40 years, and the result ends up being this weird an amalgamation of all these things that don't really go together. So it's like, I understand throwing a lot at the wall, but this didn't seem to have what is your vision? It's like, let's just try it. And it's like, for 40 years, you didn't know what you wanted. It just, that's the baffling part to me. I really don't get that.
I think also
in the chat we have our friend, the great Lynn B. Lynn B, this is, don't even try. There's nothing for a good person like you to take away from this. We're sort of we have like a car crash train wreck quality in looking at it. What were you going to say, Liam?
But I mean, just to Phil's point, I think part of the issue is, you know, Coppola's spent the last few years making mid-budget art films, right? Like films for the European market. You know, films that basically actually are not bad, but are a little more experimental than the stuff that we really like. We go in thinking, okay, this is a work from the maker of The Godfather and The Conversation, and You're a Big Boy Now, and you know, Apocalypse Now, like all these movies that he's extremely famous for, like he's revered for. Yeah. But this is not what he want. Like he wanted to create a kind of like, and I'm not saying this makes it a good movie by any stretch. It actually makes it worse. But like he was like, I'm going to use all of my abilities and all of my connections to get these bigger name stars, and I'm going to leverage all of my money into making a film that I think makes an important statement at the expense of story, development of character, and, you know, creating a realistic world that film goers can kind of ease their way into.
Now, what I'm wondering here is if this means that Lynn B actually took the time to see this movie, because she says she gave him a lot of grace because it was Coppola. I kept hanging on, needed a drink after. Yeah, I mean, I think that we could have lined up some shots at MacGuffin's, the bar there at the AMC 16, and really made an afternoon of it. What were you going to say, Liam?
Oh, I was going to say, listen, if it was anyone other than Coppola, I would be rooting against this movie. Like Joker 2 is an easy movie to root against. I mean, nothing wrong with Todd Phillips. He's a very popular filmmaker. People love his movies, but he has not made anything with near the personal impact that a lot of people have felt that Coppola has. Like, he hasn't really.
Yeah, no, since we're talking about Coppola, you know, obviously they say never invest your own money in your movies, but he did exactly that. He sold his vineyard so that he could make this movie, reportedly for anywhere between $500 million to $1 billion. I don't know, maybe he has more than one. He sold one of them. And he spent $125 million, which, when you look at the movie, the scope and the scale of it, you're like, wait, he only spent $125 million? He must have gotten some of the money from somewhere else. But as we talk about Coppola, before the film was even out, I was talking about, just at dinner, talking about Coppola. And to Liam's point, I have his IMDb page open. And when you look at his recent track record, it's a lot of things that most people didn't even hear of, let alone see. People remember Jack, perhaps not fondly. You go back to 1992 was kind of the last time where most people saw the movie he put out. Before that, Godfather 3 and Tucker. Peggy Sue Got Married. I might have to be an apologist for. I love that movie.
That's a good movie. It's not a great movie.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, the early track record is phenomenal. You know, like you said, you know, Godfather, Conversation, Godfather 2, Apocalypse Now.
I mean, look at that 5-year period.
Yeah.
From the Godfather to One from the Heart, or that's a 9-year period. I apologize. I mean, like, look, One from the Heart was not by no stretch a great movie, but it's by no stretch a terrible movie either. It's just this first real big experiment that flopped, you know?
But the point is that this is a guy with, you know, some of the greatest films ever made under his belt. But his overall batting average, I mean, is probably, to keep it in the sports world, it is definitely below the Mendoza line. You know, he should have been optioned to AAA by the late '90s. What were you going to say, Leah?
I was just going to say, like, you say that, but all the way through 92, he rarely made a bad movie, right? It's like Rumblefish was a
Rumblefish
good.
isn't a bad movie at all. I agree with you.
Even The Rainmaker, it's got the name. If it didn't have the name Coppola on it, you'd be like, that's a movie I could watch, like when it comes up on cable TV. You know, it's just by the time Jack comes along, the name Coppola raises so many expectations that it can't. Jack's a piece of shit, but it's a piece of shit by the guy who made The Godfather.
That's fair.
It makes it
by
even.
the way, speaking of the name Coppola, I'm sure you both noticed that Roman Coppola involved in this. Sophia, nowhere to be seen in the credits. She was like, "You have fun with this. I'm going to go do something else," as in anything else. Phil, you referenced something that I want to play in a moment. It's a very specific trailer, but as we're talking about Coppola's body of work and this now being at the top of his list, maybe for a very long time, maybe forever. I mean, he'll make something again, but he's not a young man. There's not going to be a lot more. So what are you thinking as we sort of scroll through his past accomplishments? And of course, we are here to celebrate Megalopolis.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, there's a story about Salinger that I've heard where someone went up to him at like, a soccer game and stuff like that where he was with his kids. And they're like, your second book wasn't as good. He's like, well, when you write the next great American novel, let me know, because at least I got one. So in that respect, he gave us all those movies. And I mean, in many ways, to like make one movie like that is an accomplishment of itself. So
agreed.
It's one of those, do you take just a bunch of like kind of average movies that eventually will fade away and call that a success? Mm-hmm. Or like, again, whether it's The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, whatever, a conversation, those will be a part of film history forever. You know what I mean? And so it's like the rest of it will be forgotten, and that's fine. We can talk about it in the moment, but to like accomplish something, I don't know if it'll ever be like the Mona Lisa or whatever, but it's, feasible enough that it could be in a conversation of that nature.
Well, especially when you look at how The Godfather was made and how narrowly it was a bad movie. Like, it was just like a miracle that not only was Coppola kept on as the director and allowed to achieve his vision, but like literally everybody was against his vision. And he was so broke, his entire family were living in a 1-bedroom apartment in New York City when he was, when he was putting the movie together. The odds against that book being a major international bestseller alone were so huge that like you have to understand, like it takes someone who really has a passion and a commitment and a talent to pull that off.
Well, I think that, look, the reason why I think most people saw it, probably why all of us actually took the time to see it, is because it is a Coppola film. And right. To something that Phil referenced earlier, they used Coppola sort of as the star, despite the very recognizable cat.
True genius
in this trailer,
misunderstood,
which we'll talk about in a moment. The Godfather, a sloppy, self-indulgent movie, The Village Voice. Diminished by its artsiness, The New Yorker. Doesn't know what it wants to be, also The Village Voice. Go to 1979, Apocalypse Now, a spectacular failure, National Review. Hollow at the core, an epic piece of trash.
Not Rex Reed.
Yeah. A triumph of style over substance, a beautiful mess. All flat about Dracula.
Rex Reed again.
One filmmaker has always been ahead of his time.
Go.
So, Phil, you know the problem with that trailer, so why don't I let you reveal to our audience?
Well, spoiler alert for the trailer, those aren't not real quotes.
Yeah, well, they're real quotes, but they're not about the movies that they say they're about.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so the style over substance, I believe, was about Tim Burton's Batman. It was not about Bram Stoker's Dracula. So someone just did, and look, it only takes a little bit of effort to do some fact checking, because if that's accurate, what a great idea for a trailer. Like, listen,
Right.
you know the greatest movies ever made? Here's what these idiots said about them, you know?
Right.
And
First of all, I knew something was up with the Pauline Kael quote because art over everything else. In 72, she was Woody Allen's best friend, right? Like that was right in the middle of their bromance. Like she was all about art over everything else.
right. And by the way, Stuff to Watch says Megalopolis is the most cinematic experience of my life. By the way, I don't disagree.
Not at all.
It is the most cinematic experience of my life.
Honestly, I saw it on an IMAX screen. I could have seen it on a bigger screen. I'm not kidding. Like there's not a screen big enough to contain what I was sitting there watching.
Yeah, I agree, and I just saw it on the regular screen, but I don't know. Oh, you know what? Joker was on the IMAX. I'm like, wait, what was on IMAX? Oh, that's right. So I'm sure that Coppola was thrilled about that, and it's interesting because maybe we'll get to it, maybe we won't. I have just some conversation with him where he's talking to the camera a little bit about what he thought this movie would be. But I want to ask both of you, and I'll ask you first, Phil. Sitting down to watch the movie, what was your expectation? How much did you already know when you saw Megalopolis?
I mean, I knew nothing. I mean, Megalopolis, right? The title implies something about a city, right? And then when you see the first kind of opening, okay, it's going to be an allegory for America falling apart. And I'm like, okay, I can dig it. Like, it's one of those, like, you go into it rooting for it to be good. Like maybe other people just don't get it and I'm going to see some brilliance. Like, let me just see it on my own without being tainted. And then it kind of goes in the ways that it does. And I mean, one of the biggest things is that he can control time. We talk about it, but nothing happens with it. So it's so disjointed.
Well, let me just interrupt for a second, Phil. If I was able to control time and I survived a shooting, I would control time to go back to the moment before I got shot. But that's just me. That's just me.
Well, you're not wrong. So again, like it doesn't have that narrative flow. And ultimately, like what's odd to me is that after all this time, and I'm not the first person to say this, but like you built an airport. At the end of the day, like what if you're going to imagine an impossible city that we can all live in bliss and utopia, you got escalators, bro? That's it? That's all we got?
No, really? He had moving walkways.
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to say, Phil, he didn't design an airport. He designed the people mover at the airport. So we didn't even get an actual airport. Yeah. It's just like, oh, you want to go to somewhere? Great. Yeah. We will take you there. And
who could imagine a city with golden vaginal towers? Yeah. Like only a genius.
I know, and there are a lot of elements to this where you feel like, oh, this feels like an idea a guy's been working on for 40 years, because the gender bendery stuff, I texted Phil, one of my favorite lines is revenge tastes best while wearing a dress. All of this, I'm like, in 2024, it's like, I don't even notice. It's in 1984, it would have possibly been something, and there's times where obviously the Roman themes and styles come throughout most of it, but a very Caligula-like performance from Shia LaBeouf, at least early in the film, and there's so much of it that it feels like it never really comes together. It's almost like Megalopolis was supposed to be, I don't know, like a 6-part TV miniseries, but they canceled it halfway through. And they're like, well, I guess we'll use this as the ending and not try to really tie any of it together, But
well, speaking to that point, I think the biggest example of that is just Dustin Hoffman in this movie. And if you haven't seen it, I'm about to really spoil something, which is it felt like Dustin Hoffman just one day said, fuck it, I'm done. Because his character's like, I'm going to go out now. I'm going to take care of this thing. And then the next thing you know, someone's pointing at a statue of him and they say, oh, he's dead. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I guess I literally saying to my friends, did Dustin Hoffman die off screen? And a guy walking past us said, yeah, he did, bro. Right. So like, and then the last you see of him is just like some footage Coppola must have just taken of him with CGI statues falling around him, and you're like, I guess that's how he died, or is that?
Well, I'm glad you compared this to an Ed Wood film, because it is, of course, a reminder it's a reminder of the great Plan 9 from Outer Space, where Bela Lugosi died before filming started. So there's a guy with a cape around his face who is dentist. Yeah, his dentist.
It was Ed Wood's dentist, and he was a foot taller than Lugosi, and he has a cape over his face as he walks out of Ed Wood's house. And that's the end of that character. And that's exactly what that reminded me of. It's just like, like Coppola was like, I can't cut this guy out because God forbid we make this movie confusing in any way.
Yeah.
So we'll just end his arc there.
Yeah, and I did read a quote from Coppola that he was open to casting people who had been canceled. And I don't know that Dustin Hoffman has literally been canceled, but he's been surrounded by some controversy in recent years. It's not like he hasn't worked. Jon Voight, the controversy is that he's a Trump guy, and I don't think there's really that much more controversy beyond that. Although if you've ever gotten a series of 4 voicemails from Jon Voight, you might have a different thought as to how tethered he might be, but maybe that's a story for another time.
If Midnight Cowboy was the beginning of his career and Megalopolis was the end of his career, I think that would be a great career. I really genuinely this would be a great last movie for him.
Yeah. One of the things you said earlier, Phil, I wanted to kind of think, obviously I was making a joke, go back to the club, but what do you feel are, and this is the way you have to look at a movie like this, individually, are there scenes, are there moments, there's things like, and before I even finish asking the question, like visually, this is great the whole time. Like it's something to look at in every shot. And I appreciate that. But in terms of scenes or even maybe performances, what are the things that you feel, oh, that's actually kind of interesting, even in the context of this movie that doesn't really work for me?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that scene that you played, that clip from, it has the greatest line in cinema history of, and you think 1 year of medical school entitles you to plow through the riches of my Emersonian mind. It's like, again, like what movie are we watching? Because that's a great line, but again, to the point of, we talked about the Roman aspect of it. Some people are kind of leaning towards that. Other people are like it's like you got them off the street and they're wearing their stuff from H&M. It's like, what are we doing? There's no cohesion here. Certainly the Jon Voight pulling out the bow and arrow and killing WoW Platinum, which is what I call
bow and arrow, more like boner arrow.
There you go.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
And then when you opened up with the Hamlet thing, it's like that was confusing in of itself. And then to learn, it's like no, Adam Driver was doing that to get into character, and they told them, "Hey, we'll film it." So it's like that just is what an odd choice.
Yeah.
It's not like in Wolf of Wall Street, right? You have McConaughey doing his famous thing, and they integrate it as part of the plot. This is like, and it just keeps going. It's. I watched Hamlet while watching Megalopolis. Like I'm pretty sure that was the entirety of Hamlet. You can't convince.
I mean, it boils down to that. Honestly, I mean, there's a tremendous Kenneth Branagh version that has every line of Hamlet. But if you want to just distill it to something, it's that soliloquy does tell you the whole story. It's the ultimate spoiler alert.
But especially like when you look at like how much other Shakespeare was thrown in on purpose. WoW Platinum is Lady Macbeth.
Yeah.
There's a King Lear aspect to the story as well. Like. There's just so much Shakespeare thrown in that, Phil, if you hadn't explained that to me, I would just have thought that, Coppola's like, let's make this as explicit as possible, as early as possible, and bring the whole movie to a grinding halt for 5 minutes.
And it kind of did. And, the way that sexuality is treated in this, so I sort of mentioned the gender bending, character like Shia LaBeouf, whose name I refuse to say any other way. And, again, that gaggle of women that Chloe Fineman is a part of. And by the way, I was saying to my friend Tim that I saw it afterwards, I want to know who's going to be the first person to kind of break the wall about this movie and acknowledge the fact that this is maybe a bit of a misfire, as I said earlier. Like, I'd love to see Chloe Fineman doing one of those features on Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, and then the punchline is like, "And I should know, I'm in the worst movie ever made." You know, somebody's going to break at some point, but right now, I think everybody's honored to have been a part of it. What were you going to say, Liam?
There's a great Aubrey Plaza interview where she talks about how, like, she basically shooting this movie was so weird, and she said a lot of very nice things about being in this movie, because again, working with Coppola, just what a, every actor wants to do that once, right?
Yeah.
But it's like she talks about how, like, it was so stressful because there was just no sense of direction from the top, and there was no, like, sense of cohesion for her, and, like, not a lot of, like, this is what you should be doing for her, that she would just start her day in character as Wow Platinum, because she just was like, this is how Wow Platinum would deal with it. And so she would be in the limo stressing over the day ahead as in character. And she would just stay in character all day as like a defense mechanism. So, like, there are people out there who have been involved with the movie who are already who have been talking to the press for 2 years. Talk to anyone who's been on the crew of this movie. Like, so many of them hate Coppola now, and they have nothing bad things to say about it.
I want to jump in.
Go ahead.
I want to get your opinion on what is her character, because she starts off as a reporter.
Yes.
And then that's abandoned into something completely different. I'm like, what happened?
So she's like, she wants to be a part of a power couple. And when Adam Driver says no, she's like, all right, well, who's the oldest character in the movie? Nope. Dustin Hoffman's not quite old enough. Okay, the guy who controls the bank. And that's actually her character is sort of what I was getting towards. Like, she's supposed to be this very sexy and sexual character. And I think that Aubrey Plaza can definitely carry herself and present herself in that way in other films. But she just could not come off as less appealing as she does in this movie. Like that wild scene at the end with Shia LaBeouf with the anti-wow, and he's like going down on her and she fucks him on the table. And it's just like, eh. Like, I should have enjoyed that scene. Go ahead, Liam.
The Hollywood audience I saw loved that movie. Love that scene, rather. They were like super into that scene.
I bet a couple.
I'm sorry, Holly Weird. Excuse me.
I bet a couple of cameras came out, like that scene in Brown Bunny with Chloe Sevigny. Eventually, that you're like, I want to bring this scene home.
But to your point, here's how I look at this movie. I feel like this is an autobiography above everything else. Like, I feel like it's a passion project for Coppola because he's a guy who, as a filmmaker, sees himself as creative worlds. Obviously, there's that scene now. Now I'm reading all the reviews. Everyone else caught on to this. If Adam Driver is the god of this world, then he's going to name the son of God Francis, right? Like, if it's a girl, we're going to call her Hope Sunshine. If it's a boy, Francis. And so when I look at it that way, I'm like, well, who was the reporter in Coppola's past who, like, was hitting on him, and then when they saw that he wasn't available for whatever reason, moved on to someone even bigger and more powerful than him?
Wow.
And so when I look at a character like Wow Platinum in that regard, I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. Like, obviously, this is someone who's hurt Coppola's feelings, and this is his way of, like, getting his side of the story out and kind of like exorcising this demon.
Well, then, what's the moment in his life where someone accuses him of sleeping with a rock star who's underage, but she's really not, so it's a big deal, and then it's not?
I mean, that could have been any one of his extras if you believe the lawsuit that's come out.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because there are two things I wanted to touch on. You mentioned a moment.
By the way, he's suing Variety for libel, so be a little careful about what you say.
There are videos of him walking around set for that. Basically the Studio 54 scene,
allegedly.
There's video where you see him trying
I'm still going to say allegedly, no matter what.
Extra, allegedly. You're right, Phil.
He's still got $300 million. Deep pockets, big lawyers.
That's true. Allegedly, you see a video where but the response from one of the producers is that, yeah, he's trying to keep the atmosphere light. It was a party. He wanted to put people in the mood. And if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, guys, but if it's true, I don't know that there's a worse person to be walking around and doing that. Maybe Adam Driver would be a better choice. I think John Voight, even Dustin Hoffman, if you believe what you read, maybe Tootsie could have gone around. The Rain Man could have gone around and, I don't know, smelled some lady's hair. What were you going to say, Phil? Allegedly.
Well, the crazy thing is, as a director, like there are rules. Like as a director, you can't talk to the extras to begin with.
Is that true, by the way?
That's true. So oftentimes, you have
a third AD.
Yeah. So oftentimes, like what'll end up happening is the director will be talking to the AD and he'll be like, "Hey, can you get him to do this way?" And the AD will just turn to the extras, and be like, "Did you hear that? Okay, cool, do that."
I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I will say, by the way, I always say Coppola's now directed the best wedding scene in history and the worst wedding scene in history, right? But during the wedding scene in The Godfather, that's what he would do, is he would go around and he would make sure everyone understood that this was actually supposed to be an Italian wedding and get people dancing and get people in the mood. So I think like that just might be his go-to in terms of like getting a party scene going is like, and the other thing is he's an old Italian grandpa now, right? So like, he's going to touch a woman's waist. He's going to kiss her on the cheek. I mean, that's just like what his generation of Italian grandpas do. I mean, I didn't read anything or see anything that looked like it crossed the line to me personally.
Yeah, no. And that's kind of what I was getting at. It seems to have been dismissed, but what you were talking about a moment ago, Liam, is that there are a number of people who quit the production. It was the entire art department, I believe, was the example you used. So talk a little bit about it from that standpoint. We were talking a little bit about actors and possibly what they might say about the experience, but what about the crew on a film like this?
Well, I mean, from what I've read, and I wasn't there, so everything is secondhand through people who quit because they didn't enjoy working on this movie. But it seemed like he's got this old-fashioned auteurist way of working, combined with the fact that it's his $120 million that he's spending. And so he's spending that much money. He's going to do it exactly the way he wants to do it, right?
Sure. Right.
So it's like, VFX people now, like he had the Guardians of the Galaxy VFX crew. I mean, he did not skimp on that. But they're used to working a certain way. And they're used to like saying like, well, we're going to handle this digitally. Let's get on with the next shot. Whereas Coppola, wants to do things. He wanted to, believe it or not, he wanted to achieve a lot of what you saw practically. And so what happened was there was some scene where they all quit over it, and he brought in Roman Coppola to just like he did exactly what they did with Dracula, which was just like. Him and Roman Coppola figured a lot of the VFX stuff out themselves, like practically.
Yeah, so I guess that a lot of this comes from, decades of habits. And, there's a world of difference between going around a scene that is filled with extras 50 years ago and trying to put people in a mood to be festive than there is now, and going around when you're also 50 years older and allegedly, according to reports, always smelled like weed. But again, I wasn't there. So I want to bring in a couple comments from the chat. That's Sky the Magnanimous, which I didn't know you could get that many characters in a chat. But I think that Megalopolis was trying to be the new metropolis of the 21st century at Francis Ford Coppola at the helm, and it didn't work. Who's greenlighting this? Where was the rewrite and rebudgeting? Yeah, I mean, I think that the title is not an accident. It is sort of like, oh yeah, this is the modern metropolis.
There was no greenlight. Coppola.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
Coppola made it and then started a bidding war that nobody wanted to enter.
Anyone who's ever worked on anything, there's the idea of having editors or network notes or feedback that sometimes is preposterous. And you're just like, well, what do these idiots know? There are plenty of times where you do need someone to say, yeah, I think not this. How about that? Right. And, a lot of these auteurs have sort of like a second command that they trust. I understand the accomplishment that was Oppenheimer. I have felt less enamored by Christopher Nolan movies since he stopped working with his brother. And I think that I'm not saying anything on this level, but when you have that person that you always use, and
I mean, the classic.
who was it that worked for Woody Allen? It was Jean Doumanian who did that bad season of SNL, but then she was like stealing money from him or something, so when you have that person and they go away, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, this is great, everybody, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. What were you going to say, Liam?
Oh, the classic example that everyone uses is George and Marcia Lucas, because right. Marcia was his wife and his editor, and she gave him a lot of very good story notes. I mean, she basically built the final sequence in the editing room of Star Wars, right? And then once they got divorced, Star Wars went, Lucas stopped making films after Return of the Jedi for a very long time. The stuff he produced was not up to par, really. I mean, he spent 20 years making Red Tails. Now, if you've ever seen it, it's not Megalopolis, but it's also not that expensive.
Right.
Was it Radio
Radioland Murders? But obviously you have, some other stuff. Howard the Duck was what I was going to mention. That
What about you, Phil? What do you think?
My friend Kaylee, aka Lucy Tightbox, is an apologist for Howard the Duck. But what do you think about this idea, though, Phil? That the collaborative process, it's not always right, the feedback, but it's good to get some feedback that at least you can consider, am I making the right decisions? But what do you think about that, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you're making anything, you just need perspective, right? I mean, it's when you look at companies, they say companies that have diverse thought tend to be more successful. And, for me, when I work on my movies with my team, early on, a lot of it is setting up like, hey, this is what I'm going for. So that way they understand a baseline foundation, and then it becomes easier that they can contribute to it. And very rarely will I then kind of dissuade an idea. I'll be like, you know what, I get what you're going for, but the reason why it can't work is because of this underlying thing. So I explain why, and it just continues that knowledge base. And in that respect, it's no different than a director talking with their actors of like, here's your character, and then the actor brings, more stuff to it, and you get a brilliant performance. But going back to what we talked about with this, it's like, I'd be hard pressed to have any one of them truly explain like who is their character and what is like the foundational vision of what this movie is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sky goes on to say, Sky the Magnanimous 8, Lionsgate, what's really going on over there? Y'all don't want to hit? Y'all don't know how to write good scripts, or is it too hard? Didn't lower the budget. 130 million should have been 80 million. I don't know. Sky goes on to say that they did not see it, only clips, trailers, and reading reviews, so I probably shouldn't judge. But it seems like the marketing was so off it didn't apply. Look, the marketing that I showed, if it hadn't been blatantly filled with lies, was actually a great idea. This guy's a genius. Here's this thing. But what I hate when something is, and I don't think that this is as critically acclaimed as sometimes it is, what I don't ever want to be told is that I didn't like it because I didn't get it. I didn't see the filmmaker's vision. Well, that's the filmmaker's job, to have an idiot like me get what their vision is. And if you're making a movie that I can't get, don't expect me to like it. And I mean, I've never been more conscious of the passage of time in a film as I was in this. And Killers of the Flower Moon is an hour longer than this. It is exactly an hour longer than this. And I didn't feel that during that movie, which, again, not perfect, but Liam, you were part of the panel we had talking about that film. So I don't think it's necessarily on any audience member who walks out to have like, do you want me to explain it to you? Maybe then you're going to like it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think to that notion, Phil?
Well, I was going to just talk real quick about Lionsgate. Like,
yeah, sure.
For them, ultimately, yes, they're a distributor of the movie, but as far as I understand it, they were like, we're not doing marketing for this. So that was another piece of the puzzle that Coppola had to fork out more money for in order to. So while yes, Lionsgate, as I understand it, enacted the creative vision behind the marketing, Coppola gave him the money to do it because they were like, listen, we'll put it out, but we're not, we're doing no marketing.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, they did fire the guy who did put together that trailer with the quotes that weren't accurate. So, yeah.
Yeah. So from their perspective, like, it seems like they're in a bad position, but as far as I understand the whole story, they put no money into it. They just stand to gain whatever amount back, which is not a lot at this point.
On this sort of the same point, I came across a tweet. I believe we can still call them tweets. And I don't know what Beyond Fest is, but they said people asking us if Megalopolis is, quote, good or, quote, bad, seek the wrong answers. It does not live in the binary. The fact that it exists is what is most important. It is a defining chapter of a King Lear-scaled madman who conquered his highest mountain and wrote his own destiny, which, by the way, should have been in some promotional materials. And it goes on to say Coppola remains as defiant and relentless as he was in Vietnam. This film is a defining statement in his legacy as an artist, a cultural act of war in opposition to the monolithic status quo. It is a beautiful miracle it exists because it absolutely should not. Hail to the king. And I boil all that down into, I didn't like it. But when you hear something like that, it's sort of a bombastic declaration. What say you, Liam?
Look, again, I'll always root for Coppola. Sure. I'm rooting for him to get his $120 million back somehow. He'll never be homeless, so I'm not that worried about it. But I look at this and I say to myself, we live in a world now where movies are mostly funded like big movies, like movies that are not like personal, like low budget, kind of like labor of love movies. You rarely get movies are funded by venture capitalists now. Yeah. And it's funded a lot of the time by an algorithm of like, if we spend this much money and have these actors in it, we'll make this much money. And the studios have always been about profit. So I'm not saying like there was some magical long lost time when like, studios were like, we're just going to make a bunch of art films and, fuck audience reaction. But I think this will be the last time you see a filmmaker like Coppola for a very long time spend as much money as he spent to make something that at the end of the day is answerable to no one but himself and is really just like something that satisfies himself. And is that a good thing? It could be, but it's like as much money as like Marvel movies get, or it's really ultimately filmmakers that want to make a decent film that are different than. Oh God, I fucking getting lost in this thought. But basically, the end of my thought is like it's going to be venture capitalists, hedge fund people, stuff like that, who are really going to decide what movies get made and for how much and what kind of movies are going to go forward.
Well, to that end. Oh, go ahead. Good, Phil. Please.
I was just going to add on to like, some people are taking the piss in it of saying, okay, well, he could have funded newer artists and, they each could have gotten 10 million and made 12 movies, whatever. And it's like, okay, that's all possible. But you forget like American Zoetrope, like that in itself would allowed for a lot of artists and stuff like that. Like he's given back in many, many ways. So for him to spend his money, as you said, like he doesn't have to answer to nobody, and the grand scheme of things, like, yeah, $120 million is definitely a lot, but it's not his total net worth. So it's like, if it's a failure and he enjoyed it, who the hell am I?
Well, yeah. And I mean, ultimately, look, it got a 10-minute standing ovation at Cannes and at Cannes.
Everything does though.
I was going to say, what doesn't? That's actually what my point is. What's the movie where there's like one guy, like to again go back to Citizen Kane, when his girlfriend opens on Broadway and the crowd is just silent and he's like, he's the only one clapping. When does that happen at Cannes?
I think Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny Might have
They
only
got
gotten.
6 minutes. They got 6
Well, I
minutes.
thought I was going to say 2 or 3 minute, but okay.
Yeah.
But I feel like I would want like just give me like a 15-second clap and like let's just move on with our day, everybody. Like, what are we doing here?
At minute 2, I'm sitting back down. I don't care what the movie is.
But it's like it's the same thing on Broadway. I think people are just so like, this is part of the experience of going to con. We have to give this a long-standing ovation.
At least in Broadway, the performer's right there, and yeah, look, if Adam Driver walked into my theater afterwards, all right, I'm being polite. I wasn't happy to just spend the last 2 hours and 28 minutes with you or whatever it was, but it's nice of you to come out here. I
go to Phil. I'm currently going to a film school where there's a class where a critic brings in, filmmakers after you screen the movies they've made. And, it's tough sometimes to give them even like this, like after watching Don't, Knock at the Cabin Door and the writers come out, the writer producers, and you're like, okay, well, you're here. I guess I'm not standing for you.
Well,
I mean, so like the crazy part to me is good, bad movie doesn't matter. Like, I'm much more interested. Let's do a Q&A, because
right.
The fascinating part about all this, like, yeah, we can make fun of the movie. It is what it is, and things of that nature. But I'm still fascinated by the behind the scenes making of it. So regardless, I still want to know. Like, yeah, you're pretty insane for having made this movie. Now tell me how you made it.
Yeah, and look, because my wife is in the Writers Guild, we've gone to a number of screenings at the theater that the Writers Guild has, and sometimes you get a Q&A with the filmmaker. My favorite one was they were showing a true classic. And the screenwriter of Beverly Hills Cop spoke after we watched Beverly Hills Cop. And what I learned about that movie just blew my mind. And I do love those things. Even a movie that maybe you don't love, let's hear what the filmmaker has to say afterwards. And I have some thoughts from Coppola I want to play in a little bit. But what were you going to say, Liam?
I just wanted to say my favorite was The Holdovers. We saw The Holdovers, and Alexander Payne was there.
Wow.
And... look, as soon as the credits started, I raced to be right near the microphone because I wanted to be number one. I was that guy. I've never been that guy, but I wanted to know how he directs his actors to get such consistently excellent performances movie to movie. And he gave us a 10-minute breakdown on his directing technique with actors. And to me, that was like the most, like, luckily someone filmed it. So like they sent me the video afterwards. Cool. But to me, that was the most interesting, like, helpful thing I've ever heard as someone who aspires to someday make films myself. Like, just how to deal with actors and get performances out of them.
No, I mean, in getting to have that opportunity, it's, the idea of having like a interactive, director commentary on a DVD, getting to actually talk to them. One of the movies that we saw within the last couple of years at the Writers Guild, it's not a movie that I think a lot of people saw, but Zach Braff made this movie called A Good Person with Florence Pugh in it. And afterwards, I had a thought about a very specific scene that has Morgan Freeman and Molly Shannon. They're the only two in the scene. And it's like some directors might have wanted to cut that scene, but I found it to be so moving. And he's like, oh, that's my favorite scene in the movie. That's really interesting you said that. So just getting to have that sort of interaction. Then I did tell him that my wife and I went to see Garden State on our first date. So he liked that as well. But what were you going to say?
Can I ask Phil a question? Phil, so you're at the microphone at a Francis Ford Coppola Megalopolis talkback. What is your question? Like what inspired you to suddenly have all these statues come to life as Adam Driver drove past? Actually, that made the most sense to me. I take that back. But like, there's so much batshit stuff that you could ask about. Like, why did a hand grab the moon?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, like, what would have most fascinated me in the moment. But like the idea that, like, so nowhere in the marketing is necessarily, like, I didn't see the word fable as part of the marketing. So just that kind of context in and of itself, kind of indicates that there's an artifice, that it's going to be a little bit experimental. So, when you boil it down to it, how just that choice, what was it? And I think I understand the fable to be like, hey, be kind and nice to each other, I think, unless you guys disagree. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things, and like it does look beautiful. To his credit, like maybe it's part of this. Like, where did you have the fucking perseverance to go in like 40 years?
Yeah.
And like such bad luck. I mean, they were going to make it in 2001, and then 9/11 happens. And, so it's like the fact that he just kept going, that's a quality that most people just don't fucking have,
I think it's a great point, and there's a video that I came across on YouTube. Someone named Rick Worley posted it, and the title of it was sort of misleading because it says people are attacking Megalopolis for the exact reasons it's great, and so this guy goes on to give a review. But the reason I'm giving him credit because I'm about to share his video, it starts with Coppola talking about sort of what he's thinking and how it comes about. And I just thought it is sort of important to the process to know, like, it's like Jay Leno asking Hugh Grant after, he was found with a transsexual prostitute. What were you thinking? So the question to make the obvious comparison to Coppola is, what were you thinking?
I made movies in every style known to man. I made movies in this style and that style and that style. I've learned all stuff. Now I would like to find out what is my style. And I'm just going to slowly pick a subject matter that interests me and then write an original screenplay from that. And I did. I took notes and I read a lot of stuff. And I became interested in a peculiar little wrinkle in Roman history, which is known as the Catiline Conspiracy. The Catiline Conspiracy really was a story of someone whose position was very classical and old, that the old traditions are good, which is so, versus a conflict with someone who was more futurist, that we should leap over the old and into new ideas. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you made a Roman epic, but didn't set it in ancient Rome, set it in modern New York, did a story, a big New York story, in which Catiline and a Cicero or the mayor and an architect were at odds.
So that's just like a minute of him. There's obviously a lot more. And look, I would say if you're interested in the film, check out Rick Worley's video. There's a lot more to it there. So it's like, all right, at least I know what his jumping off point was. And I felt like the New Rome, New York thing, it seemed inconsistent at times. I'm just going to say it didn't really work for me. It wasn't like, it didn't always look like, oh, this is a different place. It usually looked like New York. Knowing that that's sort of like, okay, I want to take this moment in history and do that. Does that explain it to you anymore? Or would you still have questions for him, Phil, if you were able to take that microphone after people finally sat down after applauding for 10 minutes?
I mean, I got that even without him explaining it. Again, it just comes down to the execution. So me personally, I always have a fascination of the disconnect between intent and execution. So, I mean, more than likely, I would try to ask him something more technical, because for better or worse, the $120 million does end up on screen, as far as the visuals go. And so, what is it like to create that world, from scratch? And, just his process of, what are you referencing? What do you not want to reference? What iconography do you want to tie in with whatever religion and everything else versus you want to create your own? Just kind of digging deeper into that mindset of just that process,
Yeah.
And
what about you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and just forming my own opinion after. Like, again, in that moment, I don't have to like a movie in order to be interested in, the process. And, hopefully Coppola never sees this review or whatever. But that doesn't mean, like, if anything, I don't dislike the person. I think they're very talented. It's just I don't have to like something, in order to like them or not like
Yeah.
them.
No, look, I think that one film does not necessarily change an opinion. I mean, I suppose it can, but when you have the back catalog that Coppola has, it's just going to make you think like, oh, I wonder if his brain works in the same way. I don't even mean that's not a jab at being older. It's just like, oh, you don't look at the world in the same way anymore. I don't know what that vision leads to. But I'm wondering, Liam, sort of the same idea. It's sort of what we're talking about.
Well, I just want to respond to what you said for a second, which is like, yes, a filmmaker can get older and their brain can work in a different way. But like John Ford still directed both Stagecoach and The Quiet Man. And both were equally great movies in different ways. And The Quiet Man was, like this movie, a personal project about, if you've never seen it, it's about John Wayne is an American who returns to Ireland, to where he grew up, and tries to buy his childhood home, and he falls in love, and it's this like really great story, and Victor McLachlan delivers a powerhouse performance. I mean, it's just like, what an amazing movie, right? And so it's possible for a filmmaker to kind of like lose his way in terms of like, John Ford never really created an action movie the way he did with The Searchers ever again. But he created, I mean, then again, The Quiet Man had that amazing 5-minute brawl, right? So it's like, but I'm just saying it's different kind of movie from an older, wiser, different kind of frame, a filmmaker in a different frame of mind. I mean, there's a reason why we are discussing Megalopolis without having scratched the surface, without, in a way we're not discussing like Woody Allen's French only film, which, is also fascinating, but in a completely different way because of the circumstances under which it was made,
Yeah, no, a lot of times that backstory, and then the legend surrounding it, the film that I most want to see ever since I found out about it, I believe we might get to see at some point in the near future, is Jerry Lewis's The Day the Clown Cried, about the Holocaust, because of the legend. I just want to see why was he so upset about it, because by all indications that movie Life is Beautiful is not that dissimilar from the themes, but also Jerry's performance must have really been something for us to have never seen it,
Well, it's funny, like that film still hasn't been released. It's going to be released, I think, in a couple of years now. Yeah. They don't have all the elements, so I don't know. Like,
it's also not finished. That's part of the problem, right, Liam? Yeah.
But it's like, people are already saying, well, it's a misunderstood masterpiece. Yeah. And it's like, I bet it's not that either. Like, I bet it's going to be somewhere in between the worst movie ever made and the great movie that nobody could understand,
Yeah, I mean, I it's hard to paint a movie with the brush of worst ever, but when you get a movie that has a lot of elements in place, when it has funding, when it has a cast, and it has people behind the scenes, that's when it's more surprising. Low budget movies that I've seen on Mystery Science Theater 3000, I don't consider those like, oh, it's surprising that a movie called Puma Man is not very good. I'm shocked that Robot Holocaust didn't get a wide release, So
Manos the Hands of Fate might be the worst movie that's ever gotten any kind of release ever.
Agreed.
It's fascinating. And I'm not saying by any stretch it's a good movie.
No.
Or anything like that. But it's made by a guy who's like such an outsider with such a limited understanding of what makes a movie work, that it's actually like I described Megalopolis, an anti-masterpiece.
If I was teaching a weekly film class, I think that on the syllabus would be both Manos, Hands of Fate, and Megalopolis, because I think you're making sort of a similar point. I like this comment from Stuff to Watch. The movie is like walking through a museum and enjoying the art. And I think that a lot of us look for something else. This was a very different movie-going experience for me, and this is directed specifically at Liam, who has gone to the cinema with me. I had 0 sodas and no popcorn. I just sat and watched the movie. So it's
you raw dogged it?
Yeah, I did. I raw dogged this movie. Yeah.
I mean, the problem is if you had any kind of pee break during this movie, you would have missed 10 things. Like this, you couldn't.
And
you
yet
couldn't-
nothing. And yet you still would have missed nothing.
Yeah,
I went.
I fell asleep during the wedding sequence, and I woke up, and it was still going on, and I missed absolutely nothing in like 5 minutes I was out.
After I had seen it and I'd raved about it, I'd gotten a group of people together to go see Pulp Fiction in the theater. This is going back 30 years. And two girls I was friends with decided they just had to go to the bathroom. And they went at the point where they first backed up in time and sort of, circled back. So they were confused the rest of the movie. I was like, yeah, it's probably not the time to go. So yes, it is one of those ones where I'm like, I don't know if I want to really miss anything. But
you might have got laid if you did, pal. That's all I'm saying.
Ain't that true? Ain't that the truth, brother? So the point that sort of came up earlier is what studios sign off on, and a movie like this being very difficult. And look, there's examples of, people shopping around movies and television shows to everybody, and no one wants to take a chance on it. I mean, just read about Matthew Weiner trying to sell Mad Men and how long it took and who said no, which was everyone except AMC, basically. So it's interesting that it's like, oh, everyone saw this and said no. You can understand something like this. You're like, it's too big. I don't get it. And obviously I think that this is more of a Scorsese thing. You have people say that there shouldn't be so many superhero movies, and Marvel movies aren't really movies. And, they're not real film, and having existing IP, having toys like Transformers turned into 10 movies, things like that, all of that. I'm willing to hear that argument and even say that, yeah, there is too much of that. But when you make a movie like this, it doesn't make the case of, yeah, we should really, take a flyer on more of these passion projects from people we have had good work from before. I think it doesn't help, basically. I think that we're not going to get any less Marvel movies over the next 3 years because of this. I think we might get some less DC movies after Joker 2, but I think that that's because of the corresponding intellectual property. And boy, James Gunn sure doesn't have anything to say about Joker 2, by the way. I checked. He doesn't have any thoughts. But what about that, Phil? Sort of like there is the argument that it's too much sequels, reboots, and adapted things. And then you have somebody has a vision like this. Do you think that this hurts other visionary filmmakers who might want to try to do something different?
Yes and no. I mean, it's tough. I think when I look at sort of, let's say the world of Disney, right, and back then, yes, there's a lot of negative stuff about Walt Disney himself. But when asked of like film was life essentially, and when people wanted to go home, he was like, "But we're making movies." So nowadays, like the heads of all of this, as you kind of made mention a little bit earlier, they're looking at the bottom line. It's like Wall Street. They're looking at this as stock as opposed to trying to make movies that then make money, right? And I think at the end of the day, the people in those positions, if I saw this, I don't know if I'd have to read the script to see like, okay, how crazy could this actually be or not?
Right.
So I don't think you automatically green light a project like this or someone with a proven track record. But yes, there's a way to green light more out of the box ideas. And yes, I think part of it is like if you're going to take a flyer on a movie, then you have to really be budget conscious of like, make it for 20 million or something like that, right? And be judicious about it. So I think there's a path forward in that way. And I think studios kind of have to, streamers are sort of going that way because, Netflix's whole model with the rom-coms and stuff like that, like those are in that budget range and people obviously want to see them. And when you look at Anyone But You, the Sydney Sweeney and what's his face, Glenn, right? The guy from Twisters, what's his name? The hot guy.
The hot guy. Where do you want me to start? Yeah, he's
Mr.
also
Evans.
in Top Gun. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so everyone said like, what the hell are you doing with this movie? Like it cost way more to make. How the hell are you going to
Glenn Powell, by the way.
Glenn Powell, yes. and that made like tremendous money, right? And it ends with Us, same thing, only cost 25 million and ended up making a boatload. So there's a path forward for these types of movies. And to borrow from probably a lesser known sort of rapper, there's a market out there for everything. And so it's not, you just got to find a way to market to these people instead of recycling the same marketing schemes of like just putting in, like it's not just the movies that are cookie cutter. It's you just literally want to market them exactly the same way. And so let's say this was a good movie. You have to market it as such. And so the Lionsgate trailer, beyond the pulled quotes being incorrect, was a fascinating trailer. It just wasn't a good movie,
I would also say, like, the thing is, the problem with a studio like Marvel and to some degree DC Studios is, it used to be that a studio would make movies they knew this guarantee were like, 100, like they would occasionally luck into a movie like Love Story, which made, $100 million, or, movie like that. Now they're making these guaranteed $500 million, $1 billion movies all the time. But what they're not doing that the studios used to do, which is then use some of that money to then invest $20 million into a smaller film that that might also then turn out to be a hit film, or because that's how it used to be. It was just like, okay, well, you've explained who you have, you explained like who you have attached, you've explained what the film is, you explain what it's going to be like, you've explained that it's like these other movies that were already successful. We'll take a 20 or 30 or whatever $50 million gamble on it. But there's none of that. It's just a lot of like vampirically just churning out kind of like the same movie over and over again. So I think when Scorsese or someone talks about that, they're less talking about like, comic book movies are bad, and more about like, this is now just the model for filmmaking, which is put all your money into one movie that is going to make $1 billion, rather than encouraging young filmmakers to kind of make the films they want to make. Like, I think, people forget when they talk about how bad comic book movies and IP movies are, that Jaws was based on Robert Benchley's, Killer Shark book, which, like Godfather was based on a book Mario Puzo literally wrote because he was tired of writing artistically satisfying books that made no money. Or, like Rosemary's Baby is based on a fucking spoiler.
And Apocalypse Now is based on a very thin Joseph Conrad book called
unreadable book, in my opinion.
Very loosely adapted, but still,
my point is, like, these are movies that were based on trash that became kind of like art, that were elevated because the filmmakers behind them had a vision for what the story could be. That's all I was.
I think that's a great point. Good.
Like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, right? It's a little bit, kind of the opposite way, where that was obviously very successful in terms of the books, but you had a filmmaker bringing a vision to the material, as opposed to now it's more so a studio says, all right, we have this IP, who can we get to kind of bring something to life? And so it's not that these artists aren't creative, it's just that initial spark isn't led by them. And I think that needs to switch.
Well, and I don't want to go too far down this specific rabbit hole, but one of the most...
I got time.
One of the... Yeah, well, first pitch isn't for like 50 minutes in the Mets game, so I got time. But, the one of the things that is most disappointing about specifically the way Disney operates is the ease with which they replace filmmakers. Edgar Wright was supposed to make Ant-Man. I can only imagine what that film would have been. I think Ant-Man is one of the examples of that's a very well-made Marvel movie. Peyton Reed did that one. But I would love to see what that was. And the Han Solo movie, that was Lord and Miller, who did the Lego movie. And, they bring in Ron Howard to kind of tidy it up. And who knows, maybe it was a mess. But probably wasn't. It just wasn't what they felt was what was going to work. And in the case of the Han Solo movie, not a widely appreciated or successful movie.
I enjoyed it.
I gotta say, I had fun with it. I had more fun with that than any of the sequel movies and any of the prequels. I thought it was like, oh, this is a fun Star Wars movie. I actually legitimately liked Solo. Yeah.
As far as Disney Star Wars goes, honestly, It's about as close. And I think like whatever Ron Howard did, Ron Howard's a great filmmaker.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like they replaced him with the janitor down the hall. They're like, fuck it, get Lord Miller out of here and get the next person I see in that seat.
Right.
Like, I watched a Seagal movie where he fired the director and made the DP, who's never directed anything before or since a movie. And you can tell exactly what was directed by a professional and what was directed by a guy who's getting shouted at by Steven Seagal. And it was a fucking mess.
Yeah, but it's that expectation of, like, well, it has to sort of fit in this mold because we're in the hit making business. It's like we're not going to let these musicians write their own songs because we have songwriters who write hit songs. So we're going to do that. So we want filmmakers who are going to make movies. And look, I think that obviously you want to make a successful movie, like we said earlier, but you'd also like to make a good movie that makes a lot of money. And, the idea that you're just like not willing to take some of those chances and then some of the chances that they do take, it is at times more than just a little bit baffling. But I don't know. I think that I wanted to bring in this comment from Sky the Magnanimous. Are there any concepts or ideas, books, comics, video games that could be or should be adapted to the big screen or small screen with indie actors or big stars that could have worldwide appeal? When you look at existing IP, it's very tough to find things that haven't already been done. When we got movies of both Angry Birds and Emojis in the same couple year period, you're like, oh, well, I think we might have got, like, there was a Twister movie. No, I don't mean the hurricane, the storm movie. I mean Twister the game. There's a Slinky movie in development for many years. So yeah, I don't know what there is, but let me know if either of you can think of something.
I got to tell you, Stephen King right now is in his hard-boiled detective mystery phase of writing. Like, for whatever reason, he just loves writing these hard-boiled mysteries. Most of them are released just in this very small imprint called Hardcase, and they don't get big marketing pushes. He just literally does it for the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
You read these and you're like, this could be a movie. This could be a $15 million movie, absolutely, with very little alteration of the plot, characters, or dialogue. I mean, there's just books like that out there.
Right. Well, interesting that you say that because Sky the Magnanimous is talking about a book I haven't heard. Phil, you're more well-read than I am, but let me know if you know this. Lionsgate, or really anybody, should consider adapting a novel called No Shall Sleep by L.A. Marney. It deals with two teenagers, a serial killer, and a U.S. Marshal in the 1980s. Can you move it to the 90s? And instead of a marshal, how about retired disco singer? I'm just trying to think of how that idea could instantly be ruined by a movie studio. But yeah, I think that
the Village People still available. We need.
Well, the Native American, I believe he's retired, but the guy in the hard hat and the cop you can still get.
Actually, I think the Indian is a DJ now, right?
I actually didn't realize that. I had no idea.
Oh my God, it was a DJ. He had a big feud with Howard Stern in the 90s, early 2000s.
Now all of a sudden you're speaking my language. But Phil, I mean, to that point,
the Greaseman. That's the Greaseman. Sorry,
you're talking about he had a feud with the Greaseman on radio. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. The DJ named the Greaseman.
Oh,
or of course the most petty reasons ever. But anyway, go ahead.
Let's do a special on the Greaseman sometime, Liam. I don't know if you can find.
Dude,
I don't know if you can find any of the clips of the Greaseman, but Phil, as someone who's as well read, how often do you read? Is more well read than I do. I know you and our friend Marissa seem to read a lot,
Sure.
And I'm always like, oh, I wish I could read. I wish I knew how. But how often do you read something like this book is so great? Why is no one making this into a movie? Like I feel like probably constantly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good ones. Like if you want like a Desperate Housewives, whether TV show or movie, there's one called Prospect Park West, which is amazing. There's a fun one called The Midnight Library, which we just read, which a woman wants to end her life, and she ends up in this library where each book is a different veering path of her life, and so she's trying to figure out what life could I have led. And then there's my favorite by R.F. Kuang. She wrote a trilogy called the Poppy War Trilogy, I think that one would be a great anime. It's like it's incredible. Where there's like this pantheon of gods that certain people can access, and so like the main character of Rin in particular, she can call upon the Phoenix and just kill everyone in battle with it. So it's fun.
Well, you got to be careful. You don't want Disney talking about copyright IP when it comes to characters named Phoenix. But yeah, see, I knew that you would have examples like that because
I mean, listen, Phoenix is like the oldest. You know what I mean?
No,
like,
I know.
That's public domain at that point. Yeah.
Yeah,
Dude,
you try to explain that to the Mouse House, okay? What were you going to say, Leah?
Terry Pratchett's Discworld books are these international bestsellers, and all they've been adapted to are these bad, low-budget British cartoons. It's exactly the kind of like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings style IP that a good filmmaker could turn into a huge tentpole franchise.
Well, it's always surprising because as self-proclaimed lifelong Marvel nerd, even in some of these worlds, and I'm sure somebody who's more read in DC can give examples of, like, I can think of 3 comic book series that the mini series from years ago that's like, this would be an amazing movie, this would be an amazing Disney Plus series, but instead they make things that are completely different. And I don't know why sometimes the things that you're like, yeah, this would be great. And Terry Pratchett, that's a perfect example. I mean, I know that I get. Oh no, that's him and Neil Gaiman. That show that ended
Good
up
Omen,
on.
Good Omens,
so that's not just him. Yeah, but that is, and
Right.
I have my friend Zoe for years has been a huge fan of him and just always raved about him. And it's like, I don't think much of his work gets adapted, at least not well, from what you're saying. And that's an example of that's a proven commodity. Just like, how many books did this guy sell? All right, you think you could maybe translate that into a movie? But I don't know.
I mean, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was made a movie 20 years after Douglas Adams died.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that, and I'm still hoping we'll get Restaurant at the End of the Universe, but I don't think it's happening, at least not in that iteration. But again, Sky the Magnanimous would love to see David Fincher, Karen Kusama, Ty West, and Scott Cooper adapt DC Elseworlds. This is sort of what I'm talking about. Projects with budgets under $80 million. Well, that would be if maybe you want to do as a what they call a Max original. Blue Amazon, Batman, Nosferatu, Emerald Knight. I mean, yeah, look, if you can get a studio to be like, oh, Vampire Batman, okay, we're listening. Sure, And an important question from Sam Bibley. What's good, players? I
just want to say, you want to be careful throwing out an idea like that because James Gunn does watch this show.
He does. Yeah, I know.
And you don't want him stealing your ideas.
Although he did turn it off when I said he's got nothing to say about Joker 2. He's like, all right, I'll just pretend that I don't have anything on that. So look, as we tie it all together, I'm glad that I was able to share this conversation with both of you. I talked a little bit with my friend Tim after we walked out of the theater, but it's not one of those movies that I can talk about right away. I had to sit with it for a little bit, and just you need to process what you saw, And I am glad that I saw it cinematically. I feel like somebody is going to watch this on Max or Netflix or whatever, and we won't even have the remote experience. I also feel like if it's on TV, you're gonna turn away from it. You're not gonna stay.
I'll put this out there. So I will do my due diligence. I will learn the scene. So hit me up when you're watching it on Max. I will go to your house and I will do the live performance when it is appropriate.
You were the one who said that to me, right, Phil? That it's there's like a reporter during one of those scenes, and then the image shrinks on the screen. And,
So as I understand it, the house lights come up. So if you found the movie confusing, now imagine you're watching it. It I guess theoretically pauses. The house lights come up. So you're like, wait, what's going on? And then some guy literally walks up to the screen and is like, hey, Adam Driver, what's going on? Or whatever the hell the lines are. And then the dude answers and the house lights come down and then you continue. It's what?
I imagine it's like when you go to a theme park and there's like a screen before a ride and the person who turns is interacting with it. Oh, what should we do? Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator? Okay, listen, everybody, get into your seat. I felt like it was going to feel like that.
There's a great article. I forget, maybe the New Yorker, but they actually interview one of those guys, and it turns out he just worked in the marketing department that Lionsgate worked with, and he was asked if he wanted to do it. And so he would go, and he basically watched the whole movie once just to get a feel for it. And then he would just go every day, watch the first half of this movie, walk up to the mic, deliver his line, and then he would go about his evening. And apparently paid nothing for it. Got like nothing but like a somewhat cool story.
Yeah.
And he just seemed like very over it.
It does seem like it would be easy to be over. Yeah. What were you going to say, Phil?
Well, the concept, as I understand it, came about like Coppola wanted to have these like dynamic scenes recorded, and it was supposed to happen multiple times throughout the movie, where anyone could go up to the screen, like literally us if we were in the theater, and just ask a random question, kind of like Amazon Alexa style. The movie would choose the right response from Adam Driver. Just the technology for theaters doesn't exist. And if that was like the case, I really think like, remember Bandersnatch on Netflix, like the choose your own adventure? Like if that's what he was going for, and if that was the truest vision of what he wanted to create, then I think he could have just done it with Netflix in that way. You know, obviously I think he still would have to pay for it. They wouldn't give him the money, but, so it's fascinating. And the fact that it's like, okay, if that idea didn't work, you literally just want to have a person in a theater, like, and the fact that we're still confused. I can't tell you which scene this is supposed to be in. I don't know.
I do. It's there's a press conference scene.
And there's many press conferences though, aren't there?
Is it the Hamlet speech press conference or a different press conference?
I mean, here's the thing. Imagine all these self-involved motherfuckers who are on their phones, talking to each other, like crinkling their popcorn bags really loudly, but also now they're allowed to just interrupt the movie every time they're confused and ask a question. That movie would last 18 hours.
That's not my fault.
Sorry, we have to stop down because
imagine if, like, you know, those two old ladies who are always sitting behind you are like, what's going on in this scene? And then the movie actually grinds to a halt and goes, well, lady, since you asked, this is John.
Let me explain it to you. Sky the Magnanimous 8 says, the Bladtcast, y'all are the best at what y'all are doing. Absolutely incredible. Been here for 15 years. God bless you, sir. Great work, Christian and crew. Love these discussions. More discussions like this, please. I'm glad you say that, Sky the Magnanimous. So please be here Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, when I will be discussing Joker. I'm going to just call it Joker 2. Maybe I'll learn how to say the French. We'll be talking about that then. I'm going to have two conversations. First with someone I've gotten to know over the last few months. Her name's Laura Grafton, and she is a comic book scholar at a university in Canada. She's written extensively about Harley Quinn, and she's already let on that she enjoyed the movie way more than she expected. And I'm like, oh, this is a different conversation than I was thinking we were going to have. But then after I speak with her in the same episode, I'll be getting hard-hitting, in-depth feedback from Adam Hughesy, the H-Man Hughes. Ireland's own Hughesy will be on the same stream with me talking about Joker 2. So
get ready for him to tell the same joke 10 times.
Which, by the way,
were you talking to me or talking to Hughesy? Because I'm going to tell the same joke 10 times. Yes, sir, Phil. What were you going to say?
Well, if you want to know the full pronunciation, so it's called Joker Folie à Deux.
Joker. Oh, I see that.
The Joker's, you know, that part's still French too, you know?
Yeah, the Joker.
I mean, what a month for cinema we're having.
I know.
And Joker.
I would say that 2024 is an amazing year for cinema of questionable virtue. It started early in February when we got Madam Web. We were treated to Unfrosted. Liam, you and I saw Borderlands on an IMAX screen.
That sure was a movie. By the way, I saw Joker 2 on an IMAX screen.
Yeah,
and
so did I.
Lawrence Scher, who is the cinematographer, did an amazing job. And I will say this for Todd Phillips. This was not a good movie. It's the same problem that as I said before, Megalopolis had, which is just no story. And there's no B plot to cut away to. So you are in the story for the 6 hours it unfolds. But Visually, it's remarkable. You can follow the story. You know what's happening on screen at all times. Unlike Borderlands or Megalopolis or Madam Web, this is a very well visually realized film.
So you're saying Joker is that? Yes. What were you going to say, Phil?
I feel like we need to cast more like honest actors. Like Dakota Johnson during her press tour was like, I don't know, and, or like Will Arnett, he'll say like, obviously he does good movies now, but he'll say like, if it wasn't for bad movies, I never would have made a movie in my life. So we just need people like that. Just be honest about the work that you created.
Our buddy Sam Bibley says, I didn't care to see Joker 2, but I'm actually so impressed by the god tier trolling of spending $200 million to give the finger to the fans and the studio. I don't know, kind of a genius in my opinion. There's that take on what the movie is that I will talk about.
There is a bit of that, but also Todd Phillips produced A Star Is Born, the Lady Gaga version. And now he's produced the Dark Mirror version of A Star Is Born, also starring Lady Gaga. Yeah. Like there are layers to this movie. It's just they're no good.
Sam also asked the question, do you think that with that mentality, I could enjoy viewing Joker 2 or is it too boring? I wouldn't say boring, but I think that there's not a lot of time. You feel like there's a lot of times where they're flicking an old Bic lighter. The flame never really kind of ignites, but there's sparks throughout it. And I don't know. I can't recommend anybody see any movie anymore because everything. I hear tell that art is subjective, but I know it when I see it, and I haven't seen it lately. I guess.
I think you'll spend time pulling out your hair, so that might like counteract boredom.
That's true. Yeah.
Really, you sit there and you're like, well, now he's back in a cell. Okay. Yeah. I guess he didn't go anywhere. Or like with the escape scene, suddenly there's something happening. There's an action. There's a sense of urgency. There's stakes, and then they're caught. And then you see their people behind the fence they were trying to climb, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess that was nothing. What was the point of that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. No. Go ahead, Phil. Yes, please.
Well, because I won't be part of that conversation. My frustration with.
By the way, you could be if you both could be there if you want to. If you want to talk to an Irishman, but go ahead.
It depends on.
It might help actually.
Overall, like as grounded as the movie wants to be, right? Like that's kind of the whole premise of it. The whole courtroom stuff is like, this is not how courtrooms work.
Yeah.
I
mean, they at least address the fact that's like, well, it's against my better judgment that he sit here in clown makeup, but I guess I have to allow it. Like, really?
Right.
You're the judge.
That's literally a nod to the audience. Hey, what you're about to see is stupid, but we're going to go with it. Because in what courtroom would this ever be allowed?
Look, I grew up in 1980s New York, and they caught the vibe. But I will say, even as broken as the system wasn't as broken as you saw in Joker 2.
No, exactly. And honestly, when I realized that it's a minor spoiler, but that a lot of the singing was going to be fantasy. There's like the one number where they're like on the talk show set. I thought it was going to all be like that. I'm like, if they're going to sing, give me really good big production numbers and make sure that Joaquin Phoenix, hits some of the notes. But they don't really do that. So they don't even deliver on that idea. What a terrible idea to make it a musical was my first thought when I heard that. Yes, Phil.
Real quick for your Friday show, just do yourself a favor. Look up Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Charlie writes a musical and be ready about it.
Oh, is that the Night Watchman or Cometh or whatever that one's called? Yeah.
Man Cometh, yeah. By the way, the idea for this to be a musical was entirely Joaquin Phoenix woke up from a dream that the Joker sequel was a musical, and it became a $200 million movie.
Man, if I told you guys what I thought when I woke up from dreams, you'd never talk to me again. On that note, I'm getting ready for first pitch, but
hey, let's go Mets.
Yes, exactly. Let's go Mets. But Liam, if people want to know where they can find you, I don't know if you have like a set schedule where you pop on with our mutual great friend Kevin Brennan, but where are places that they can find you?
Well, certainly Misery Loves Company is a different kind of podcast than what you just watched. But I'm on there. Well, they call it Fatter Days, which is very nice. It's that kind of show.
It's because you're fat. Do you get it?
Believe me, I get it. I get it. But that being said, I honestly, and no offense to you or to Carl or anyone else, I've never laughed as hard on a podcast as I've laughed when I do that show. And I'm usually there Fatter Days. I will also say I have a special coming out in 2025. So be on the lookout.
Which Eric Connor and I were there for the taping.
You were, and by the way, I didn't thank you for coming, and I except for on stage, but I really, really appreciate you guys coming out.
Oh no, we were glad to do it. And Sam Bibley knows who you're talking about. Wow, Kevin Brennan.
I will just say also, if you want to find out what I'm doing, I'm on Instagram at Radio Liam. I'm on Twitter at Hey It's Liam. And if you follow through the link on Instagram, I'm also on Threads. And I'm also on Venmo at Hey-It's-Liam.
Hey, all right. Phil, do you want to give your Venmo or Cash App or Streamlabs, Rumble Rants,
Sure.
Super Chats, anything?
We'll just keep it simple. PhilSvitek.com and all the social media, just same thing, Phil Svitek. So simple.
And a couple of months ago, you were on the Bladtcast and we talked about your film. And where can people find that if they want to check out your work?
So good news for you. PhilSvitek.com, like right on the homepage, has the featured work, or you can, it has the tabs for films, books. So there's 2 movies that are officially out, and we're in the works of a 3rd one, but that'll take a few years. So,
and by the way, those are called Finding Love in Bogota and The Love Market.
Well, not Bogota, because that's New Jersey. It's Bogota. Finding Love in Bogota is a Bergen County story.
I'm from Queens. I'm barely educated. What can you do?
Yes. And Phil also filmed and recorded a panel that he did at LA Comic-Con where I was in the audience. So if you listen, you'll hear my Charles Foster Kane claps. And he was kind enough to let me borrow his Zoom recorder. So it's great to see Phil all then. And as always, you can find me.
Are you saying you were the only person applauding in a theater full of angry people?
No, I'm just saying you can hear me. No.
He has a very distinct clap. Like, do it again. So there you go. See, like when you hear that, it has a pitch, Yeah. It's like what they test dogs with it.
Sky the Magnanimous. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Phil, for your instant into the world of films, your insight into the world of films and entertainment and book IP adaptations and original concepts. Thank you, Christian, for inviting us to your amazing platform. Sky the Magnanimous, please be with us and everyone be with us when we talk about Joker.
I might watch that.
Yeah, well, I'll send you the link. What are the numbers? I'll do all those things. But
send me the link.
You can find me Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And please subscribe to the Bladtcast. If you're watching the YouTube channel, smash that like button, y'all. Give us a like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And you can also find us as an audio podcast. That is all the time we have for now. But, look at this. Sky the Magnanimous is like, wait, Phil Svitek from AfterBuzz TV. Thank you. So he's like, wait, I know that name. So,
right.
Yeah.
I told Christian, just because we did 7 years worth of South Park does not entitle him to plow through the riches of my Emersonian mind.
No.
But here I am.
It doesn't. But it does entitle us to continue adapting Sexual Harassment Panda into a Broadway musical. Fingers crossed that we get to do it. What are we going to say?
I just want to extra plug Christian's show next week because our friend Carl once almost kicked Husey off for just making literally the same joke over and over and over again. So should be a very interesting show.
I've had Husey on a few times, and I've had him on a very PG channel that I do stuff on. So it's always an adventure with Husey. I'm a very big Husey fan.
Me too.
That is all the time we have for now, but we'll see you next time on the Bladtcast.